giving the principle of impersonalization of God. We're at a place in the book of John where there is a preparation for the Last Supper. And in this preparation there is a much truth-teaching, great discoursing about the nature of the purpose of Christ on earth. And I think it would be wise for us to see what Christ says is Christ's purpose, rather than for you or me to decide what his purpose is. And so the purpose of Christ is stated as thusly. We find it in several places in the book of John. Here I'm looking at John 9:39, and Jesus said, "For judgment I am come into this world, that they which see not might see, that they which see not might see, and that they which see might be made blind." And so we see a plan there which is a total reversal of all human concept. For we who think we see are to be made blind, and those who see not are to be made to see. And this reversal of concept, this awakening, is from the dream of mortality. And the closer we get to the truth, the more uncomfortable it becomes, the more we are in a state of rebellion against it. Unless, of course, we have so been touched by the Spirit that even the degree of newness and strangeness of the new life that comes upon you is welcomed with a great inner joy. And if the truth frightens you to the point that you want to back away, then that is a sign that you are not yet among that remnant which is called the seed of Christ, who are ready to move into that which is unknown to the mind of man. And if you are not ready to release your concept and to be made blind, so that you can see, and to give up what you see, knowing that in truth what you see is not what is there, you're not in that frame of consciousness which says to the Christ, I am ready. I'm ready to yield. I'm open. I have no concepts about the outer world. Now again, in other places in John, to clarify this purpose of making the blind see and those who see not see, we come to such passages as John 3:14, 15, and 36. As Moses, always Jesus is speaking, as Moses lifted up the serpent in the wilderness, even so must the Son of Man be lifted up. The Son of Man must be lifted up. And I guess by now we can probably say unanimously that we know the Son of Man to be our spiritual selfhood. Born of woman into the flesh, and therefore son of woman in the first mortal birth, and then reborn of the Spirit, we are called Son of Man, no longer of woman. The Son of Man, the awareness of spiritual selfhood, must be lifted up. That whosoever believeth in him should not perish, but have eternal life. that whosoever believeth in his own spiritual selfhood should not perish, but have eternal life. And so, if we were to fear leaving our loved ones, it would be because we have not yet reached the place where we have accepted their spiritual reality. And if we have reached the place where we accept their spiritual reality, then we know that our function is to lift them up to the awareness of that spiritual reality. For the Son of Man is not only our own individual identity, but is the individual identity of all those we know. And so our function now is to lift the Son of Man. Here, where I stand, there where you stand, there where the child is born, there where the old man appears to be dying. Always there is the invisible spiritual selfhood called the Son of Man. And so lifting up the Son of Man is coming out of the blindness. It's coming out of the false sense of sight which doesn't see the spiritual Son, but only sees the first or natural birth, the physical man. We're trying to see what the purpose of Christ on earth is. And it would appear at this point that the purpose of Christ on earth is to awaken us to the spiritual nature of all being, to the spiritual nature of the universe, to the invisible reality that underlies all physical form. But if that be the purpose, and we are told that when you awaken to spiritual selfhood, when you have lifted up the Son of Man, you shall not perish, then what are we really being told about the concept of life that we entertain before we awaken to spiritual selfhood? We're told that we shall perish. And we're also told that if we're to leave it, to rise above it, it cannot be reality. Why should Christ come to take us out of reality? And so we have to face that truth, which is that where we are, what we are doing as human beings in mortality is the dream, and unless we have accepted that, we continue to live in that dream. Now, we've had our various talks about the dream. The question now is, are we accepting that it is our function to awaken from the dream of mortality? Let's presume that the message so far has made an impression sufficiently to arouse us to the need to awaken from the dream of mortality. And that would constitute the coming out of the blindness. And now we have to look out at the world and say, well, what is it? If it's a dream, how do you live in a dream? And how do you step out of a dream? And the minute you move in this direction, you find an answer. Well, what did Jesus do? How did Jesus live in the dream? And how did Jesus step out of the dream? And then suddenly it's clear that his purpose, his mission, was to teach us how to step out of the dream. To step out of the dream of mortality into the presence of spiritual selfhood. Clearly is the mission. And with every mission there must come a method. Let's go further. John 3:36. He that believeth on the Son hath everlasting life, Now then, the Son is no longer Jesus Christ. The Son is your spiritual selfhood. He that believeth on his spiritual selfhood hath everlasting life. He that believeth not the Son, he that believeth not in a spiritual selfhood, shall not see life, but the wrath of God abideth in him. Always the wrath of God and the vengeance of God has been misconstrued. The wrath of God is the doctrine of karma. Karma remains the fate of the individual who is not living in spiritual selfhood. There is no karma, no divine wrath. That's all it means, karma. There is no divine wrath or karma in spiritual selfhood, and there is no death in spiritual selfhood, and there is no reincarnation in spiritual selfhood. Now, it gets uncomfortable then, because we're past the stage of being able to use a quotation or to remember a truth and expect the veil or fog or mist to lift. It's the way you're living in or out of spiritual selfhood that determines whether you are in the state of karma or not. And so again, the mission is further clarified to dissolve the mist of the dream, that man may walk in the kingdom of God in his eternal spiritual selfhood. And further, to be underlined, I think, is the fact that this would not be given to us if it were a remote possibility. If it were not ordained that there would be those walking in spiritual selfhood, there would be no purpose for such a mission. And then further, inasmuch as the mission of Christ is actually infinite spirit functioning infallibly, those of us who cannot walk with this mission are merely walking against that which is inevitable. Spirit doesn't fail. And so all you can do by turning away is to turn away from that which is invincible. And the continued karma is the turning away from that which is the ordained will of the Father on earth. In other words, walk in your spiritual selfhood or continue to perish and reincarnate is quite clearly the message at this point. Live in the dream and suffer the double-sidedness of this world, or find your way out of the dream through the principles prescribed by the Christ, by the infinite way, by whatever measure or teaching in the world enables you to awaken from the dream of mortal selfhood. Again, in John 8, to further clarify the Christ mission, 8:28, when ye have lifted up the Son of Man, meaning when you have attained your spiritual selfhood, are walking in it, know yourself to be spirit, indivisible with the Father, immortal, eternal, omnipotent. When you can recognize your spiritual selfhood everywhere without division, then ye will know. Then shall ye know that I am He. The Christ, speaking these words, walking the earth in the appearance called form, is your spiritual selfhood. And you are given an opportunity to first out of human vision, out of human understanding, to come face to face with your own spiritual selfhood functioning on the very earth you walk. When you have raised the Son of Man in you, then shall ye know that I am he. The very Son of Man raised in you is the Christ speaking to you, saying this now. And this is revealing the infinity of Christ. That Christ in you is Christ in your neighbor. And this is the truth then that must be accepted, or it is violated by ignorance. Christ in you is Christ in me. Christ in everyone you know is your spiritual self. The Son of Man is the invisible Christ, which is the one indivisible self on this earth. The knowledge of this, the practice of this, the living of this, until it is realized, understood, demonstrated, and experienced, is the meaning of lifting up the Son of Man. And then in 8:24, I said therefore unto you, that ye shall die in your sins, for if ye believe not that I am he, ye shall die in your sins. And so your own self, the infinite Christ says, until you accept yourself, you shall die in your sins. And your sins are primarily living in a second self, which is not the invisible infinite Christ self. And we all have died in our sins many times and have reincarnated many times because we did not know that we are that one infinite self called Christ, the Son of Man. We all thought we were sons of women. We all thought we were that which came forth in form. And Christ tells us, no, you're not that. You're the pure Spirit of God, one with the Father. That which dies can never give birth to life. There's no woman on the earth who can give birth to life. Life is the Spirit of God. It is the constant behind the changing, visible, material world of flesh. And always, both the child and the mother are the one and the same invisible Son of Man. Now, this then is the purpose, and you can elaborate it, of course. It is to awaken us from the dream of mortality into the realization of the divine selfhood, which is indivisible, so that instead of 4 billion forms, we are living in one invisible Christ. And then we can accept the powers of Christ as the only present powers. And so from that, from the knowledge of self, we can come to the impersonalization of both God and error. God ceases to be person. And because Christ is all, because the invisible infinite Christ is God, and this is the allness, we learn to, by accepting Christ, look upon that which is called the world as imagination. It shows not the full perfection of Christ. We are looking at limited individual states of consciousness everywhere, none fully aware of Christ, some in high states, some in lesser states. Always we're looking at an up and down awareness across the universe. This shows forth then as our world. Now it is difficult, but very important for us to make a turn again in the practice of stepping out of the dream. You know the world that is there, being both an appearance of good and evil, is not the divine creation. You know the world that is there is but an overshadowing of human consciousness where the infinite invisible Christ is. And so you can accept that the world is not there, but only appears to be there. Christ isn't sharing the world. Christ is there. The world is not there. There's no God and. And so we come to this conclusion, and the conclusion in mind, in intellect, is not enough, but it's a start. The world is not there. It is in the world mind. In the world mind there is a world. And whoever lives in the world mind sees the world. And so if you're in the world mind, you see everything that's in the world mind. If there's a flood in the world mind, as a person, you too are in the world mind, and therefore you must see the flood. If there's a hurricane in the world mind, you as a person, being created of the very fabric of the world mind, you must see the hurricane. Everything in the fabric of the world mind must appear in your experience because you are the fabric of the world mind, until you have lifted up the Son of Man. And so as creatures, persons, human beings of flesh, we are made of the fabric of the world mind. Not divine, but of the dust. And as we continue to walk in the fabric of world mind, the evil, the good, the opposites, the pairs of opposites of the world mind must continue to function in our experience, because everything within the dream functions in the experience of those who live in the dream. If there's a skyjacking, you have to witness it because, as a creature, the very skyjacking in the sky and the people on the ground are made of the same fabric, the world dream. There's no escaping the activities within the world dream as long as you are made of the fabric of it. And we are all made of the carnal mind. We are all in our second selves, the false sense of self, which is the fabric of the dream. The mission of the Christ is to awaken us from that fabric of the dream into divine selfhood, and lo and behold, the process is to walk through the dream awake. You're not going to demolish the dream with truth. You're going to have to walk through it with your eyes wide open. Awake, not sleepwalking. Mortality is sleepwalking. Awake to the dream, we accept the power of Christ behind the dream. And Christ being all power, all presence, all mind, Christ functioning, Christ being here, Christ being there, Christ being self, we are in the reality, the cause, accepting the cause, and therefore not resisting the dream, not fighting the dream, aware that the power of Christ is functioning even though the dream may show forth another power than Christ. The power that is showing forth in the dream is a dream power. The power of the hurricane, the power of the flood, the power of the skyjacking, all this is the dream power existing only to the persons in the dream. But when you have raised up the Son of Man, when you recognize that only spiritual selfhood exists, for you the dream is but an appearance without substance, and you stand in the knowledge of truth, in the living of truth, and you reject all apparent power in the dream, knowing there is no power anywhere in the universe that can oppose the power of Christ, which is the power of love. And so right where the flood, the hurricane, the skyjacking, the disease are, there is the power of Christ. Your function is to walk in that power, rejecting the pretense of power, which would appear to be true to every creature. And with the mind, you're not going to be able to do it until you have come past certain levels of that mind. Now, this is difficult. We'll have to go slowly, please. There's nothing in the world outside your mind. Absolutely nothing. The entire world, everything in it, including the hijacking, including the flood, including the hurricane, including every person you know, including every ocean, every star, and every planet. It is all in mind. It doesn't exist outside of mind. Whatever you know about this world, you know in your mind. Every sound you hear is not out there in the world, it is in your mind. Every sight you see is not out there in the world, it is in your mind. Your complete human experience is not out there, although it seems to be. The mechanism of it is probably beyond us to describe, but let's do it briefly. It's like throwing a ball against the wall. It bounces back. World mind sends an impulse. It hits your mind and it bounces back. It becomes a sound out in the world, but it's only a sound that entered into your consciousness and bounced back into what appears to be the world. Similarly with everything you see and feel and touch. Now, put a television set where your chest is, and just put your head above it and your feet below it as if you were a walking television set. And now watch. Here, right where your chest was, is this television set, and now there's an activity on the set, on the screen. It's outside where people can see it on the screen where you are, but the only way it can come to that screen is to come through the mechanism of the set. If there's a scene of a complete football game on the screen of your television set, right where you're wearing it, it has to come through to that screen, through the mechanism of the set. It cannot come into the appearance on the screen until it has come through the set. Now, everything that happens in this world is the same way. It seems to be out there, but before it gets out there, quotes, it comes through you. And then you see it as a distance thing, 20 yards away, 30 yards away, 50 yards away. But that distance is supposition. It's happening in you. It's happening in your mind, and it's planted there by the world mind, and so it seems outside you. It's as if you were two minds in one. You're the world mind and the individual human mind, and in between them, through this mechanism, you see an external world, where all you're seeing is your own mental activity, which is controlled by the world mind. Now then, as you practice some exercises we'll now take, you'll find that you can control your reaction to what happens in the world. Every sound can be realized to be within me instead of outside me. So that as you take this into a specific exercise and just sit in your living room or on your veranda or wherever you care to sit, and for 20 minutes during the day just listen for sounds, any sound, and the minute you hear it, place the location of that sound within you, not outside. And please realize that that's where the sound is. It's within you. You can hear an airplane zooming in To the eye it's in the sky, but that sound is within you. It doesn't matter what the sound is out there. There's no sound in this world that is out there. Any sound you hear is within you. And when you are sitting there doing this, you won't feel much at first, and you'll say, well, what about it? There'll come a time when suddenly there's a quickening within you, as if a new lever has been pushed or moved. And suddenly you feel, oh, that sound really is in me. It seems out there, but it's in me. Somebody's talking on the platform, but there's nobody up there really talking. That sound is within me. And when you know the sound is within you, you know that all sound is part of the dream. It's all in the mind. And after you reach a certain point in your meditation on this, you will place every sound within yourself, knowing it's not out there. I would recommend that you only work with sound on one day and nothing else. And then on another day, I'd like to suggest that you work with sight and recognize that everything you're seeing is not out there. It's within you. It works the same way. The world mind is planting an image within you, and you are seeing that image external to you. But it isn't there because God is there. Nothing is external to you but God. The first image, which causes the problem of more images, is your own image. Having accepted this as you, you're seeing things external to this which you call you. But when you raise the Son of Man, the spiritual self, you will not accept this image of you. And you will know there can be nothing external to an illusion. Now practice seeing with the eyes, but knowing that what I see out there is not out there. If it were out there, God would have had to put it out there, and God didn't put the flood there, God didn't put the hurricane there, God didn't put the diseases there or the skyjackings there. God didn't put the avalanches and earthquakes there. God didn't put the cruelty and violence there. What am I seeing? I'm seeing a dream. What do you see a dream with? Your mind, with a dream mind. That which I am seeing out there is within me. Now, important to those who are moving out of this dream world is that you must be patient in your meditation on this subject. You will seem to be getting nowhere. It isn't enough to repeat and repeat and repeat and say there's nothing out there, it's all within me. I'm talking about the experience of it within you. The positive inner experience that that which I am seeing out there is within my mind. You'll find that you're lifted above the state of belief which accepts the reality of that which seems out there. You not only are transcending the mind, but you have the experience and the sure-footed knowledge that the visible world is in my mind. And you cannot get it by reading a book. You must practice the constant re-identification of all that you see as not being external, but being in your mind. And it doesn't matter if what you're seeing is as big as the sun, as big as the earth, as big as a star. It's still in your mind. And again, the process is that the world mind sends to you, to your mind, that which you think you're seeing external to yourself. Now you must come to the place where you can feel this. You must come to the place where you can close your eyes someday and know that everything in the world is in my mind. It doesn't matter what it is. If it's a collision on the corner, if it's a bomb falling out of the sky, if it's the worst kind of Holocaust, ever described in Dante's Inferno. It's in my mind. It's all part of the dream world, in the dream mind. And therefore, it is not a power. It is only a power in the dream. There's no person out there. There's no place out there. There's no action out there. There are no conditions out there. There is a dream out there. And right where that dream out there appears to be, the invisible Spirit of God is. Perfect, harmonious. The presence of the kingdom of God on earth is right where my mind, under hypnosis, is conceiving a dream world. The Son of Man in you rises in proportion as you are willing, able, and disciplined enough to redeem the world. The sights, the sounds, the tastes, the smells, and the touches. And I would suggest that each day you take another sense. The sense of touch, the sense of sight, the sense of smell. Why, even the food on your plate is not out there. It cannot be. God didn't place it there. It is a world mind idea instantly telegraphed to this spot where you are, appearing as the food you're eating. External to the dream form, it is dream food. Now, this won't change your eating habits at first, but it will make you cognizant of the fact that you are manufacturing this physical world every moment with your dream mind, and that all those around you are doing the same. And it is only by redeeming the physical world, sitting in the constant knowledge that it is in my mind, that you will transcend the mind, that you will come into a state of control whereby your instant reaction to an outside stimulus will not be based upon that which is there, but rather upon your knowledge that the stimulus, which seems external, is in the mind. An earthquake in the mind has no power. A hurricane in the mind has no power. A disease in the mind has no power. Because your next step is, but I have no dream mind. There's only one mind, the mind of God. And the mind of God is doing absolutely nothing about these dream activities. The mind of God is doing nothing about 1 million people on the earth who die of heart disease, another 1 million who die of cancer, another 1 million who die of something else. The mind of God is doing nothing about it. Why? Because it happens only in the dream of the human mind. Now, you've talked about the unconditioned mind, transcending mind, living in the Christ mind, and the Christ says, fine, but let's stop our talking. Do it. Redeem the dream world. Break the bubble. And you must practice in order to do it, because it takes a consistent, conscious awareness of the dream for you to break the dream. The dream is 5 senses bringing into you a world that is non-existent except in those 5 senses. And unless you retrain your reaction to those senses to a state of non-reaction, a state of knowing, of being still, non-resistant to the sense images, you continue to move in the dream, captured by the dream, and dying in the dream. Every sound, every sight is part of the dream unless the sound and the sight are in your inner senses. Unless you hear the voice that no one else can hear. unless you see the sight that no one else can see. The dream fabric makes cats and dogs and people, oceans, stars, and planets. The dream fabric makes all of the substances of our world. And they are not substances in the kingdom of God. They are only substances to the dream mind, and we must be still in that dream mind. The laboring in the vineyard is the conscious practice that I will not live in a dream world of images, but rather I will redeem the images, be still, living in my spiritual selfhood, free of the images, making a transition from image to reality. And this nurtures, gives birth to the living Christ released as your conscious mind. You find yourself unmoved by the evils of the world, and finally unmoved by the good of the world, and so that you overcome the sense of good and evil. You overcome the belief in powers of the world, and you understand why Joel emphasizes that because God is all power, all else is none power. Now this is a turning, because whenever you are able to practice this, you will discover that the world, which had given you so much to fear and doubt and worry about, simply loses the power to do so. You'll find you do not fear a world or an event or a circumstance when you have instantly found that it is only within your mind. And the day of release is when you stand on that knowledge and discover the truth of it. That there is no reality in the flesh. There is no reality in matter. There is no reality in material condition. There is only the invisible Son of Man. Spiritual selfhood everywhere, and lo and behold, that invisible spiritual selfhood everywhere can now be experienced as your selfhood, because you have purified the world of that which is not there. Until then, your world was cluttered with images, with thoughts about things which weren't there. And the moment you have denuded that world of that which isn't there, only that which is there becomes your consciousness. You can feel at first a thin layer of spirit, as it were, and then a thicker layer, and finally the very texture of spirit everywhere as all that is there, and it is your being. You come to one being. My spirit is there. How can an earthquake be there? My spirit is there. How can a flood be there? The omnipresence of your spirit automatically flows into recognition when you have removed the forms, the conditions, the sense evidence of a world that never was. And then the power, the omniscience, the all-presence of your spirit is a living reality and no longer words that you memorized. You find what is called the arm of the Lord. The presence of spiritual power is automatic, because all that is present, acknowledged, experienced is that spirit. Now when you reverse your raincoat or reverse a piece of cloth, you're doing what the Bible was telling us to do when it said repent. To reverse the activities of the mind. At the moment, the activities of the mind are saying this is there, that is there, and this is there, and let's do something about this and that. Let's have a crusade. Let's take up a collection. Let's elect this fellow and not that one. Let's do these things in this life. And the reversal of that is, let's not do these things. Let's turn back. Let's turn away from the old way. Let's not just do it a better way. Let's just get rid of the old way completely. Let's do it this way. Let's let the Spirit do it. Let's bring the world into our mind consciously and rest there, knowing all that remains is the invisible Spirit everywhere. And let the Spirit do its work. The return to the Father's house is the removal of a world. The return to the knowledge that only the Father is present. Again, this too is part of the mission of the Christ, to enable you to pull the world into your mind and then rise above your mind, turning back to the Father. Spirit returns to spirit by dropping the conscious awareness of all that is not spirit. Now let's try it again so you'll see what we mean. In front of you is a dinner. It's out there and you're going to put it in your stomach. But the form that you're thinking of putting it into is not your spiritual self. Your spiritual self isn't sitting on a chair. Your spiritual self doesn't sit behind the wheel of an automobile. Your spiritual self is never finite. Your spiritual self is what the world calls God. God is your spiritual self. Your spiritual self is where the world seems to be. Everywhere, without division. Now who's going to eat this food that's set before this form? Another self is, a person. That person is not the Christ. That person is not the Son of Man. And yet that person has been claiming to be you all these years. Now you can go right ahead and eat that food as you've always done, or you can raise up the Son of Man. And to do it, you must see that the spiritual Son of God is not going to eat that food at all. Your sense of self is going to eat it, the person you have called yourself. And while you do this, you're not raising up the Son of Man. You're just living as another human being. And therefore, in your spiritual exercise, you know that that which stands before you is part of the dream world. That's why apples can rot. That's why food can deteriorate. That's why without refrigeration certain kinds of food cannot stand more than a day or two. Not because it's made by God, but because it isn't spiritual substance. It's the dream substance of the dream mind. So with the corruption of human flesh, it's the dream substance of the dream mind. And that which perishes is going to eat that food which is perishable. That's part of the dream. That's for those who have continued to walk in the world, professing to acknowledge God and to love God with all their hearts. But it's not for the divine seed, the remnant, who are stepping out of the dream. And so our exercise is simply to know that this form and that food are not external. They are simply dream fabric. The food and the form are made of the same dream fabric. One dream fabric makes the food and makes the form. And then it gives the form a capacity to think that the food is external, and now the form wants to take the food within. None of this is of the Father. That's why you can be poisoned by food sometimes. It's not of the Father. There is nothing in the world that is of the Father. Nothing. And yet, where everything in the world seems to be, only the Father is. And so with your inner senses, where the food is, as you take it into mind and know that's where it appears, although it seems to be outside, it's in mind, what is there? Spirit is there. Your own self is right where the food is, appearing to you as food. And your own self is right where the form is, appearing to you as person. And that's the relative level of your consciousness at that moment. Person and food are what we in this state of consciousness see, feel, and experience. But we're going beyond that. We're going into a state of consciousness where there is neither person nor food, but only divine self, self-complete. And this isn't done mentally. It's done by the conscious awareness of the falsity of that which we have experienced with the senses, and the feeling, the experience of a self that is independent of both the food that is on the table and of the person who is eating that food. Your self is independent of the form that is eating the food and the food that it is taking within. Now, that is an experience that comes to you when you practice the truth of being, and it is a very important experience. When you can find yourself not where the food is and not where the person is, you'll know that you're living the mystical life. And you'll know that the dream, for you, doesn't hold as many threats as it once did. This is quite different than our reading of truth, as you see. In fact, everything we're doing in this class is for the purpose of the living experience of a spiritual universe, a spiritual selfhood. We are all learning how to lift the Son of Man, and the experiences are quite different than any we may have experienced in our readings or in our human sense of life. They're new, and there's no way to prepare for them by anticipation. They come upon you, and they come when you're ready. Just as a teacher appears when the student is ready, so does the experience appear when you're at that level of consciousness that is ready for the next experience. And it's you who determine this. As you move through and up, you are paving the way for new experience. Each experience becomes a preparation for the next. You're in the progression of spirit. And as I said, it becomes uncomfortable. But that's the badge of honor you wear. The capacity to move through these somewhat uncomfortable experiences until you find that they are very normal, and they are the signs of your level of awareness to yourself. When you share them with those who, like yourself, are dedicated to the Spirit. But always you'll find that you are going through experiences that no one else is. And they are going through experiences that no one else is too. None of us go through identical experiences. We are all released in different ways. But the time for release is now. The mission of the Christ is to release us, to lift us beyond the normal concepts of the world. Some of us are frightened by these experiences. I remember my fears, and I probably still have them. But when you're lifted out of yourself, even for a moment, there's always the wonderment about where will I go, what will I do? I don't know what's ahead. You're not going anywhere. And when the fear is there, it's very normal and it's nothing to be guilty about. But remember, it's a sort of a break, and the moment you have the fear, you put a break on the activity of spirit, you come back into mind, and that's the end of that particular experience. The moment you're back in mind, you're back in the dream. Leaving the dream can be a harrowing experience, but staying in the dream is much more harrowing. It's just that we're conditioned to the tortures of the dream. We're not used to that which is unexperienced up to this point. Now then, you're going to find more of the new experiences as you start practicing according to this suggestion made today. Daily, for 20 minutes, take a sense. And then everything that you experience in that sense, do not accept it as being external to your body. The body, you see, is never really there. You can't be experiencing something external to a non-real body. It's in the mind, just as the body itself is in the mind, both of the same fabric. Just sit there in the quiet with that as you hear those sounds or see those sights or taste those things or feel certain objects, and know this is all in mind. Take one sense a day, and if you can, go to the next sense the next day till you've covered 5 days, and then see if you have attained some degree of mastership. Just the knowledge that I have found the world to be within me. And from that point on, if you do, the master within will take you out into the universe that is really there, in its own inimitable way, with no foreordained outlining by any human mind. That's the exercise recommended for this week. Within my mind is the entire world that man has lived in. I'm not going to hold it up until it staggers me, like Samson holding the world on his shoulders. Or was it Hercules? I'm going to just release this knowledge gently within myself, even now dissolving that very mind which holds the world within it into the one mind, the mind of the spiritual universe, where all is in a state of harmony and peace. That is what is truly here, divine reality. There are no persons in this divine universe. There's only pure consciousness, only children of light. All who walk here now in this invisible universe are the Son of Man. They have been raised up beyond the level of the dream. They are present at this very moment. They live, move, and have their being in the spiritual universe that the dream mind cannot see or experience. That is the universe in which myself now is. Whatever God did not make does not exist in our real spiritual universe on earth. There are no exceptions. What God did not make does not exist. Whatever dies, God did not make. Whatever is temporary or transient, God did not make. Reality is permanent. Reality is present. The spiritual Son of Man is that reality. And only by learning to take the world into mind, in a sense to crucify the images, to redeem the world, are we repenting, returning to the spiritual universe which is our home. There is nothing in it not made by God of spiritual substance. And whatever appears to us of another substance has no reality. The 5 exercises, one daily, will help you come to a place where you can say, I accept this. You will find that you will not be frustrated to the point that you're always outside looking in and wondering where it is. You will find you have a method that clears the way for you. I think we can rest a while now and come back to the Christ message. We have always thought that the Pharisees represented some form of opposition to Jesus Christ. But we were looking through human eyes, the Pharisees were just too small, too unimportant a segment. What was happening was that the Christ was meeting mortal mind at that area, and whenever mortal mind came through the Pharisees, it came through as an intellectual experience. The Pharisees represented that level of mortal mind which was both the intellect and the human sense of high righteousness. These were phases of world mind expressing. And these phases of world mind, called the Pharisee, were unable to perceive the nature of the man called Jesus Christ. And so what he would say, the Son of Man must be lifted up, this to them would be a rather peculiar statement, because all the prophets had said that God would, the Lord would rule forever. You could go through every prophet, and principally Isaiah, Ezekiel, Daniel, and Micah, Jeremiah, and they all said that the Lord would rule forever. Now here comes this man, Jesus Christ, saying the Son of Man must be lifted up. And it was perplexing to the human intellect. The world mind was in opposition to the fact that Christ is the only identity on the earth. And the world mind being the counterfeit identity, it counterfeits the Christ in every possible way. And now the counterfeit says to the original, We're in John 12. The people answered then, 12:34, "We have heard out of the law that Christ abideth forever. How sayest thou, the Son of Man must be lifted up?" Who is this Son of Man? Mortal mind, in the form of the Pharisees, is saying, who is spiritual man? Never heard of him. As long as we live in the human mind, we continue to live in the dream which says, who is spiritual man? I never heard of him. I'm a human man. Who is the Son of Man that must be lifted up? And this is the abiding conflict in man's mind. As it clings to its own creation, its own personal self, it is crucifying its own true self by saying, who is this Son of Man that must be lifted up? We never heard of him. The prophets told us that the Lord would live forever. Where did you get this other individual called Son of Man? In other words, the mind of man is incapable of recognizing its own identity as the Son of Man. That's the nature of its dream. Then Jesus said unto them, "Yet a little while is the light with you. Walk while ye have the light, lest darkness come upon you. For he that walketh in darkness knoweth not where he goeth." And so we find that those who have become aware of and have tried to raise the Son of Man, the spiritual selfhood, are endeavoring to walk in the light, and those who have not, those who still walk in the constant knowledge that this that you see is me, they're walking in the darkness thinking they know where they're going, but the Christ says they don't know where they're going. And so we are in a state of darkness or light, knowledge or lack of it, depending on whether we have re-identified this world and the people who walk upon this world, by whether or not we say they are the light or they are the darkness. If we identify them in darkness, then we have divided the Christ, and we have identified ourselves in darkness, because there's no such thing as they are the darkness, but I am the light. Your authority on that again, we will turn to John. In 1 John, the 2nd chapter, 9 to 11. "He that saith he is in the light, and hateth his brother," meaning seeth his brother in darkness, "is in darkness even until now. And he that loveth his brother abideth in the light. There is none occasion of stumbling in him. But he that hateth his brother is in darkness, and walketh in darkness, and knoweth not whither he goeth, because that darkness hath blinded his eyes." It would be like saying there's only sun on my side of the street. The sun doesn't shine anywhere else, or it doesn't shine in that ghetto or in that country. There's no such thing as a place where there is darkness. Spirit is light. And so we come to the place where we have to accept light everywhere, though invisible to human sense, and this is our way of walking out of the dream. That light everywhere is what is there, although your senses are telling you about sights and sounds and tastes and touches and smells. The light everywhere is what is there. And so identifying the light is the opposite side of the coin of bringing the world back into you in mind. This is part of raising up the Son of Man. Now you see the two sides of the coin then. On one side you're impersonalizing the error, the evil, the darkness, the material self. And on the other side you're impersonalizing God and seeing that all that is present is yourself. The light of being is everywhere, and the images we see in the light are not there. The training of the consciousness to rest in this knowledge is laboring in the vineyard. In Joel's chapter, Realization of Oneness, Living Principles of Impersonalization, chapter 6, quote, God is the true identity of every human being, animal and plant, of animals, vegetables, minerals, even rocks and stones, the salt, the self of you and of me, and all living things in the universe. Now let's clarify this. Here's a statement that God is the self of everything in the universe. And this is the same as telling you to raise the Son of Man in you. It's telling you that God is the spiritual self behind everything in the universe. When Joel says God is the identity of every human being, you know what he means. And just for your sake, to be sure you know what he means, let me tell you about an inner experience I had in which a woman was allegedly dying, and I tried to reassure myself that God was the self of this woman. I was told in no uncertain terms that I am not this woman. I am God and I am no other. And the meaning was that there's no woman there, there's only God there. When Joel says God is the self of every human being, he doesn't mean there's a human being there which is God. He means that God is there and no human being. He means that where you are, there is God and no human being. The human being is the dream and God is the reality. It's taken 10 years before we could talk this way. God is where you are. And the you is not sharing that space with God. And it's only when you're willing to take this person into mind, just as you take the world into mind, and see that's the only place this person is. Come finally to the place where only God here is accepted as the presence. You have lifted the Son of Man. When God, where you are, is accepted as the presence, that's the meaning of Christ realized. When you come into the knowledge that God, where you stand, is all that is there, you have just declared that Christ is your name. Jesus had reached the place where he could say, I am not here. All that is here is God. That's why his name was Christ Jesus. That's his meaning when he says, thou seest me, thou seest the Father. Only until you can know and practice that where you are is God invisible, and the visible you is but a concept entertained in mind, only then have you accepted the Son of Man, the Christ, as your identity. Where God is recognized as self, that is Christhood realized. And where you are seeing sickness and disease, you're not accepting that God is there. You're accepting that you are there, or Mary Smith is there. Where you're accepting God is there, you know Mary Smith isn't there. And that's the meaning of God, is the true identity of every human being, animal and plant. Of every animal, every vegetable, every mineral, even rocks and stones. You know God isn't a rock or a stone. He's telling us that where the rock and stone appear, they're not there. God is there. Qualities of God are being reinterpreted by world mind and then your mind and my mind into what we call rock and stone. Now this is difficult because it's self-annihilation of that self which is the dream self. It's practiced quietly and secretly until that self begins to bubble up, which is there, to replace the sense of self we had entertained. Again, Joel says, all there is to humanhood is a belief in two powers. Well, that's disposing of the whole human race pretty quickly. All there is in humanhood, to humanhood, is a belief in two powers. Without that belief, there's no human race anymore. There's only immortal being. You see, we go through the pangs of self-annihilation, but all we're destroying is that which never was, in order to come to the immortal self which is. We've been trying to have a physical person here as well as a spiritual self. And the physical, the mortal, we'd like to say is my temporary self, and then my spiritual is my permanent. But that's the division. That's living in the kingdom and the world. Half in the dream and half out of a dream. And that's still the dream. All that's here is your spiritual self, immortal, spirit, without boundaries. And every day should be spent becoming more aware of that reality and more aware of the unreality of the forms around us, so that we trace the forms back to the invisible states of consciousness which produce the forms, and then go beyond those states to the spiritual self that is present, and always knowing that spiritual self is myself. When you have removed the sense of mortality, you have removed all evil from the earth. Because evil exists only in the world of man. There's no evil in the kingdom of heaven on earth. And because evil exists in the world of man, you can know that it wasn't created by God, the complete world of man, neither the good nor the evil. Because that which we call good today becomes sometimes evil tomorrow, sick tomorrow, ailing tomorrow, fractured tomorrow. It never was good, it was never there. Now you walk in your spiritual selfhood only by breaking the dream of a mind which imprisons you in a physical selfhood. And so this mind cannot be continually used. It must be rested. You must dwell in your spiritual mind. You must be quiet to this mind and alive in that mind. The complete Christ experience shows that Christ never died. And the Christ of you is exactly that way, never dies. The flesh dies. The Christ is always alive. The illusion of the flesh must be captured by the silence of the mind, which is the creator of the sense of flesh. This is walking in the light, not in the flesh, not in the darkness, for darkness and flesh are one and the same. The Bible has always used words to camouflage what the unprepared thought could not accept. When it speaks of darkness, it means human flesh, material flesh. It means the physical world, that is the darkness. When it speaks of light, it means spirit, the spiritual universe. Walk in the light. Walk in the spiritual universe. Well, if you're going to do that, you can't walk in the spiritual universe and the darkness at the same time. And so this constant awareness that the darkness is the dream, the light is the reality, the spirit is the reality, and it is here. Omnipresence must become a realized living fact, a way of life. Everywhere is your spirit. Everywhere is my Father's Spirit. Everywhere my Father's Spirit and my Spirit are one and the same Spirit. You walk through the appearances of sin and disease, lack and limitation, But to you, if they are accepted, you're in the dream mind. If they are rejected, there's nothing to do about them other than to reject them. Because when you have rejected them, by accepting the presence of the perfect invisible Spirit, it is only a matter of human time before the perfect invisible Spirit manifests as that which is not limited, lacking, sinful, or evil. All there is to humanhood is a belief in two powers. Those powers were the power of good and the power of evil. And when you are walking in the light, you do not believe in the power of good and the power of evil. You believe only in the perfect power of the light as a constant fact without variation. Here now is the light, and therefore there is no other power present. I know they appear to be, but they appear to be only to the dream mind. And when the dream mind is still, then the power that is here can manifest through the divine mind, which functions in the absence of the false sense of mind. You might say that we're coming down to this. Is God present or absent in your consciousness? Is the Spirit, the light, present or absent? If you have an absent God, you have the presence of duality. And if the Spirit is present, is the power of Spirit present? Is the activity of Spirit present? If you have the presence of Spirit, the power of Spirit, the activity of Spirit, then you know that the opposites are not here. Two powers disappear. They only function through the dream mind, which did not have the presence of Spirit, the activity of Spirit, and the power of Spirit uppermost in consciousness. Not in memory, in consciousness. Practiced, lived in, believed in. Something you can stand on. Remember, says Joel, the promise is that you are to bear fruit richly because of your identification with God, your Father within you. He's just told us that there is no humanhood, so your Father within you must mean who you are. Your Father is Spirit, Spirit within you. Your Father within you is your spiritual identity. And the within you is all there is of you. There's no within and without. Spirit has no within and without. When you're told about your Father within, you're told about spiritual selfhood. Your Father within is the Son of Man. The Son of Man, Spirit, your Father within you, is your identity. You will bear fruit richly because of your identification with God, the Father within you. What is that identification? I am that Father within me. You're talking about myself. And that's how we bear fruit richly. There is no God outside your being to see that you get mercy, justice, or kindness. No God outside your being. Well, when you come down to a statement like that, there's no God outside your being, it's told that your being is God. All right? Now, who can look for God, or who can say God is absent, except to deny who they themselves are? Who can say I'm sick, except by denying who they are? If your being is God, the Father within, the Spirit, who is sick? The false self, the second self, the dream self. The more we dwell on this, the more we'll discover that we shuffle off this dream self. God is never lacking or limited. My being is God. Who's lacking or limited? Every error, every evil, every fault, every problem comes right back to a denial of I am that self. And conversely, the rejection of the problem as an impossibility because of yourself is the way you break the dream mind. Again, says Joel, since God does not function in the human scene, no belief or faith in God will make it function there. So you can believe in God humanly all you want, or you can have faith in God all you want. You still can't make God function in the human scene. Why? Because God will not enter a dream. And so we don't waste our time trying to make God come into the human scene. There is an invisible presence within you which goes before you. As you withdraw thought and emotion and let the inner invisible live and work through you, again we're right back to self. And so when the Master says, while ye have light, believe in the light, that ye may be the children of light, he's telling us to identify as the living spirit called the Son of Man, the Father within, the Spirit, the light, and to reject that identity which is called the mortal physical self. Everywhere, as John told us, we cannot leave our brother in darkness and say, I am the light. And so we must look at each other, seeing the light that is not visible to the human eye, and that is how we circumvent this dream mind which wants to see the physical person. And we learn that the person standing before me is only in my mind. He's in the mind of everyone else who looks at him. That's where he is. And the me he sees, and the me that everyone sees, is in their mind. They're looking at me with a dream mind and they're seeing the dream me. But the they looking and seeing the dream me, and the me looking and seeing the dream them, is the mortal man living in his dream world of Adam and Eve. Right there is self. And right there, even if an avalanche comes down at that moment, self remains indestructible, untouched, because self is the Christ, the living Spirit of God. And that self I am here and there and everywhere. And if they want to skyjack me in a plane, they're going to have to do what they did to Jesus. They're going to have to crucify a form in their own mind, because there is no form in that plane. And the very plane itself, and the form that does the skyjacking, and the crew, and the pilot, and the passengers, are all in the dream mind that perceiveth not the invisible substance called the Spirit of God. And that's where you live. That's where you identify. And you take all of the planes out of the sky. That's your function. Wherever you are is the Spirit of God. Everything in that outer world for you exists only in the dream mind which has no real existence. And right there you replace it with the omnipotence of God. That's your Bible. The presence of God. The all-knowing mind of God. And you refuse to accept that the all-knowing mind of God can witness the terrors, the cruelties, the inhumanities, and stand there and permit them to continue to happen, because that would be the way you continue to crucify God in your consciousness as the world does. Your stand is the other way. Because God is there, it can't happen. because the power of God is there. It can't happen because the presence of God is there, because the mind of God knows all and is there. That which we see is a world mirage, individually accepted, and you are out of the dream. And now you must be prepared to demonstrate it, to live it, to prove it to yourself again and again and again, until you know that you're walking in the kingdom of God and not in the world. The world is the dream, the kingdom of God is the present reality, and it is perfect as the Father. Walk in the light. While ye have light, believe in the light, that ye may be the children of light. These things spake Jesus, and departed, and did hide himself from them. When Jesus hides himself from them, that means that the intellect cannot understand. It really departs from the Christ. Christ never departs from us. We depart from the Christ. But it's phrased that he departs from them. Their departing from the Christ appears outwardly as Jesus moving away. You see, there are two comings of Christ. There really are. One is in the appearance of flesh, and the second coming is not in the flesh. The second coming is in the Spirit. And although the Pharisees were under the belief that there would be a second coming of a Messiah, and the world is under the opinion that there'll be a second coming of Christ Jesus, they're wrong. The second coming is Christ in the Spirit. There'll be no Lord ruling over this world. That's the whole meaning here. God doesn't function in the human scene. The function of God is to function as the living self of the spiritual universe. The second coming of Christ is when the Son of Man in you is lifted up. And there stands who? Christ. Yourself realized. And that's the second coming. Your own self realized by walking in the light. Finally, says Joel, we include the entire world in our realization of God as individual being. We do not recognize any selfhood apart from God. Well, we just lost a few skyjackers. We lost evildoers. We lost all of the villains, all of the murderers, all of those who we have thought were committing evil. What was happening? We were caught up in the world mind of the dream. We were seeing things that cannot exist in God's universe. And when we were seeing them, we were saying in ourselves, by the acceptance of them, that we were not in God's universe, and that God was not present where these things were occurring. That's the dream. Turn ye. God is present, and therefore this did not occur. God is present, and evil cannot be. God is present, and there's no flesh to deteriorate. There's no heart to fail. There's no bodily organ to go out of whack. There's no human being to go through the throes and trials and tribulations and the sufferings and the atrocities of the world. Why? Because the Spirit of God is present, and it is all-knowing and all-powerful, and it is all love. Awake from the dream, and you find that you're right in the kingdom of God now. You're walking in the light. All evil must be impersonalized. It cannot exist, because if it exists, you have lost God. If it exists, you have lost your spiritual selfhood. For though he had done so many miracles before them, yet they believed not on him. And so always we find that when the Christ appears, whatever the miracles might be, whatever the human eye may see, whatever happens, the intellect says, I need more proof. And so there must be more proof. The funny thing is that whereas in that day they relied on Jesus for proof, you're going to have to rely on yourself. The proof is going to come from you. Your inner self is the Christ, and it will furnish the proof that you may believe on that Christ. Everyone, says Joel, is a temple of the living God. There's no such thing as evil, then, in any man or in the mind of any man. Evil is always absolutely impersonal. Evil never becomes a man or a part of a man. Evil is an impersonal claim of a power apart from God. But the only mind is the mind which is the instrument of God. And therefore the carnal mind is never enmity against God. The carnal mind is nothing. Now let's re-identify the carnal mind. As a matter of fact, that word carnal mind is very fine, served its purpose very nicely, but it doesn't indicate that the carnal mind creates a dream. And so if you'll see the carnal mind as the dream mind, you'll understand. The carnal mind incarnates, and that's what we see. The dream mind is that mind, and it is a nothing. Once you know the carnal mind is a dream mind, you don't have to call it a nothing. It's self-evident. This world mind, then, which has been called the carnal mind, the universal mind, and various phases of conscious and subconscious mind, this world mind is the dream mind, the image maker, which imagines what is not, and then broadcasts its imagination to itself everywhere, so that our individual minds take up the dream and see what the dream mind sees and wants us to see. This dream mind is a nothing, and we're dying to it. All there is to this dream mind is the belief that there is good and evil. When you overcome the belief that there is good and there is evil, you have overcome the dream mind. You don't have two of anything. You just have the perfection of spirit. The one undivided, invisible self called spirit. See how these exercises come during the week, and watch how it carries you along to the place where you're ready for the Last Supper. And its meanings will be very clear. Get rid of this world, bring it into mind. You practically crucify it without trying to. And then you'll see what it is to eat of my flesh and drink of my blood. Spirit salutes spirit, and I thank you for being here today.